Welcome to the breakdown of The Letter. It is a short film that Cyrus and I accomplished making together. Today's breakdown is sponsored by Canon, as well as the short film being sponsored by Canon. They gave me the Canon EOS C80 to work with for this project. An absolute dream camera for me right now. I'm going to get into why I feel that way and what we did to utilize this camera on this specific short film. There's going to be 4 chapters in this. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1, functional planning and logistics. I had the idea of wanting to get a character kind of out in the middle of nowhere in this gloomy, moody place because I wanted to showcase the low light capabilities of this new camera. That was just kind of where my head was in the first place. So Cyrus and I sat over there on the couches in the studio for about 2 hours trying to figure out what would actually be a story worth telling instead of just, you know, an internet sequence of some guy like moseying around a cabin in the dark, without any kind of meaning at all. So, we were on a short time frame of when we could get this done. So I didn't feel comfortable at hiring any other actor to be in it, to do any dialogue or anything. So we came up with this idea of this letter not being read by this main character, Austin, but hearing a voicemail from his mother as another character. And then eventually his grandfather who wrote the letter narrating the actual letter to him as he read it. So it gave us the ability to have multiple characters with actually only one on screen, which is pretty unique and cool and something I haven't done before. So functionally, the way we did this was I scoured online to find a cabin rental within 1 to 2 hours of the Chicagoland area. After a pretty short search, we found this beauty of a cabin about an hour and a half from Chicagoland area. And then we also wanted a vintage truck for it. So same thing, scoured the internet, didn't take super long to find this beauty. And there's something to be said about spending a bit more budget almost as collateral for you to then be creative with those things. If you bring your vision to life in that sense of, spending a little bit of extra money to get a place that motivates you creatively, to have a prop like a car like this that motivates you creatively, it could end up making the film that much better. So something to consider instead of just cheaping out as much as you can to try to make it as cheap of a project as possible. We also rented the cabin for 2 days to make sure that we had enough time to get full coverage and give ourselves a little bit of insurance as well. Because typically on a cabin rental, short-term rental, you have till about noon to check out. We wanted to make sure we had that entire day. So we got there in the evening around 5 o'clock. The sun was already down. It's wintertime in the Midwest. And so we shot that evening, our night scenes, but then we spent the entire rest of the next day in the daylight shooting everything we needed throughout the day and not feeling like we had a time constraint and needing to get out around noon. Chapter 2, camera and lens and the philosophies for this project with the camera and lens. So super long chapter title. Should probably consult with my writers about changing that. Should we change that? Too late. Now, the EOS C80 has 2 specific features that I really wanted to showcase in the short. It's got a handful of new things on it, including the SDI out, which I actually ended up not using at all. I shot all of this with the monitor that's on camera, but I really wanted to showcase the full frame sensor and the new triple base ISO. Full frame meaning that we get a much deeper look out of prime lenses like this 50 millimeter that we ended up using, especially wide open at f1.2. You just get crazy fall off and this really dreamy look. A lot of filmmakers don't like that. A lot of people want you to stop down the lens because typically when you shoot that wide open, it's really hard to nail focus. But in my opinion, when you do, it's very dreamy and very cool. And especially in a film like this where there's so many emotions tied up in what the character's going through, that dreamy feel can really enhance the feeling and emotion of the film. Now, the triple base ISO is fascinating because it gives you the ability to shoot in much darker situations that you normally wouldn't. And so in these overcast scenarios, in these darker outside scenarios, I found myself using the 3200 base ISO quite a bit. The EOS C80 has values of 800, 3200, and 12,800 base ISOs, meaning you get a clean readout off the sensor at those ISOs. And so, there's some cameras on the market that just have 1 or 2, but having these 3 really motivated our ability to shoot in much darker scenarios, which is what this film was kind of all based on. I did mention that we used the Canon 50mm f1.2 L USM, but we also did the 15 to 35 f2.8L IS USM image stabilization is that denotation. We were on sticks most of the time on tripod and stable shots, so the image stabilization I love utilizing on this lens when I'm rocking handheld with my cinema cameras, but yeah, it does have that, just so you know. It's one of my favorite lenses to use. But some examples of, these two different things, both the full frame and the triple base ISO, that I wanted to mention specifically from the film. One was the cemetery truck shot. Cyrus drove up in this shot and it was at f1.2, but the goal here was that we didn't want the viewers to know where he was immediately. So the way we did this functionally was I set the camera up on a tripod. We got Cyrus to drive into the frame exactly where we wanted it. I clicked to autofocus to latch onto his eye to get exactly where we wanted, then switched to manual, had him back up, and then drive into the scene multiple times. He actually nailed it on the first one, which was pretty wild, but the intended effect really worked. You didn't really understand where he was until the second shot, where then we flipped and went over his shoulder and you could see the cemetery in the background, revealing that he's pulling up to the cemetery and then ultimately making the decision not to visit at the cemetery, but to drive off instead. This windshield shot was another one that really showcased kind of this dreamy feeling. And in this circumstance, it was after the main character, Austin, had fallen asleep on the couch. You know that feeling of just kind of grossness after you fell asleep on the couch all night long, and it might be kind of dewy outside and cold, and you slept all the way through the night. And maybe there's a notch in your neck and you feel terrible. I felt like that happened with this shot of getting that dew on the car, that really specific dew, and the fall off and the dreaminess. It almost feels like you're still kind of in a dream state while mom's voicemail comes in again, and she's reintroduced. Some examples of the triple base ISO. As I mentioned earlier, we were shooting a lot in overcast conditions outside, so keeping it at a base of 3200 was really great, especially as it folded into blue hour with it being overcast. But the beautiful part about the EOS C80 and these cinema cameras that Canon makes is that they have internal NDs, so you could do 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 stops of internal ND, and so it feels so foolproof to have 3 base ISOs to work off of and internal ND in the camera to work off of as well. Feels like you could shoot in virtually any scenario, but especially in these dark ones now. The way we got these car shots, especially in the beginning, some I was just in the bed of the truck with a tripod and holding it there as we drove. Maybe not the safest thing, but the other one, whereas on his side, his window, we had 2 suction cups and 2 friction arms that had quarter 20 mounts going straight into the top of the camera, into the cold shoe up here, as well as the quarter 20 mount and the bottom of the camera. And we had done this setup with my C70 earlier in the year, and since this camera is the same sort of footprint as the C70, we felt really comfortable in doing this as well, with 2 suction cups and 2 friction arms on the camera, stripping it down, taking the top handle off.
Figured it out. One on top, one on mirror. Very cool.
And then we did the same with shooting through the passenger window as well. So rolled the window down, put 1 suction cup on the body of the car and then 1 on the glass. And the camera felt incredibly stable. Make sure the friction arms were completely cranked. We did both a shot with the 15 to 35 and the 50. As it got darker, we put the 50 on to open up the lens more. But we really utilized the cars coming at Cyrus as he drove into their headlights to illuminate him, because as you'll hear later, our lighting setup was pretty minimal. But I would not have felt confident in doing these essentially in the dark at the end of blue hour without working with a base ISO of 12,800. It gave us the ability to essentially shoot in the dark, which was incredible. For the top-down shot after the car scene, we actually ended up using a heavy-duty friction arm that latched onto the ceiling fan, and then a smaller friction arm off of that went into the quarter 20 in the top of the camera. I cranked those things as tight as possible and then let it hold itself for about 5 minutes before then I removed a ladder and then got the shot, 15 mil wide open floor in the dark with the fire. A little sketchy, maybe you don't want to do that, but I felt really confident in its ability to hold that way and got just one of the coolest shots in the whole film, with full body laying on the floor with the fire illuminating him. We also used this same setup. We just left it rigged up there, took the camera down the end of the second day when we revealed the 2 breakfast shot with Austin and the plate that he ended up making for his grandfather. But we used the 50 1.2 for that shot, so we didn't reveal as much of the floor. Had the ladder a little closer that time. Chapter 3, lighting. This chapter is pretty short because we didn't do any lighting. It was all available light, which is pretty wild. We brought lights. We had intention of using lights. We even set them up and tried them out in different scenes. We ended up not liking it, especially in the fire scene. We felt like the fire itself illuminated the room in the way that we wanted to. Everything else just kind of felt too fake and too forced. Otherwise, there was a lot of available natural light coming through the sliding glass doors in the cabin, as well as the skylights, and even in the kitchen with the window on the far side and the incandescent bulbs underneath the cabinets. So there's a lot to work off of. It didn't mean that we weren't intentional with the lighting that we did have, though. A lot of times I was shooting into the shadow side of Cyrus, the subject, to create shape on the way he looked, as a lot of filmmakers do, but utilizing all of those windows and incandescent bulbs as key lights on the backside so that it wraps around his face and shoulder. In the kitchen scene, I actually hazed out the kitchen with haze in a can, and just so you're aware, be careful because you might trigger the smoke alarm when you do that. So
heads up, there's smoke in the family room. The alarm may sound. No. It's going to be loud.
No.
It became a game of trying to get takes in between the smart smoke alarm telling us that there was smoke in the bedroom and the living room. So the breakfast scene was first shot on the shadow side with windows being on the far right and back right of the subject. And I really intentionally shot it that way to get that shape on Austin. But later when we switched sides for when he actually opened the letter, I wanted a change of scene. I wanted it to be from a different angle because it was this turning of emotion and decision making for him, that it wasn't the same exact angle we just did, but a shift in his thoughts and feelings. But that meant that he was on the window side. So we actually set up a C-stand with a huge negative flag, and we put a shadow in front of his face there to shape again and shoot shadow side. So I got that negative flag as close as I possibly could, with then the window that used to be on the far right side over my left shoulder, over the camera's left shoulder, if you will, and shooting into that shadow that was created by the negative flag. Chapter 4, voiceovers. Again, we scoured the web looking for voiceovers and voiceover actors. We were able to find these 2 incredible people, Deanna and Tim. It was so fun to have a script to send to them and then hear their take on what it would be, give multiple takes, and to be able to pick and choose different lines that I loved as a director and the way they delivered it. And Tim even jumped on a video chat with us and delivered on camera to make sure that we got exactly what we wanted, which was really kind of him and just a really cool way to collaborate with someone who you've never even met before. It's really fun to find people who have other creative jobs to collaborate with over the internet. So I just thought that was really special. And Tim honestly just kind of felt like our grandpa at the end, which was really sweet.
Please just know that you don't have to be alone, that I'm there with you whenever you want me to be.
Perfect. That's it.
Cool. Great.
Did you get a chance to read that letter yet?
Excellent.
But the intentionality of bringing 2 voices like this really brought the film to life for me personally. It made it so exciting to drop it into the timeline and to just bring life to it in a brand new way. I was incredibly excited about the visuals of this film, and so I loved bringing it in and starting to color it, but then having the voices come through and putting a phone effect on the voicemail for the mom, and to really experience what the vision I had come to life in that way was so creatively fulfilling and motivating to bring it to the finish line. So often you can get stuck in post where you feel like it's not working or it's not gelling, but to have, again, renting the cabin, renting the truck, going that extra step and hiring voice actors to do that was an incredible way for me to experience a new creativity, to experience something I hadn't done creatively before in bringing a vision to life. So again, just super special. Between music choices and more sound design that I was able to put on the film, all of it just came together so well, and I'm so proud of this piece and us putting it together. It felt like it really resonated with so many of y'all, so thank you so much if you watched it and interacted with it. You can't discredit these creative choices, and for me, this is something I really wanted to stretch myself creatively. Just having two people on the team, essentially me manning the camera the entire time and Cyrus acting, it was not super easy to run and gun like this in, a 36-hour time frame, but it's entirely possible. And I hope that you see something like a compact cinema camera like this, and not even having any external lighting, relying on resources online and rentals at your disposal on the internet. This stuff is possible. And I hope it's motivating to you to come up with something like this for yourself. If you've dreamed of making a short film like this, it is honestly more accessible than you think it might be. You get a friend who's on board with you, who might want to do the project with you, and attach yourself to some creative resources that you find on the internet, and you might be off to the races. So thank you so much for watching this. I hope it was helpful or impactful. If you want to check out the EOS C80, it is linked below. I'm obsessed with this camera. I'm so excited to keep using it. It has been such a motivating, creative tool for me the past few weeks, and will be going into 2025. So thanks again, Canon, for sponsoring this. Thank you for giving me the ability to work with this camera, and I hope to see you soon with making more stuff with this. All right, peace out, guys.
Love, it ain't enough. I'm captured by the good you do.